Okay, so it's been a while since I made a ranking video, around 2 or 3 months now, so it's about time I made one. So today, I'm gonna rank every single assault rifle that's ever been in the game. But before we get into that, we obviously gotta go through the rules. So first, no ultimate exclusives like that energy blast from Season 8, kind of forgot the name. Secondly, some mythics will be allowed if they're different enough from their base counterparts, so like the pulse rifle and the overclock pulse rifle are fundamentally different to each other. But something like the dead AR and the Hush's dead AR would be put in the same spot because they work pretty similar, other than just a damage buff. All the new versions and reworks of the same weapon count too, as separate things. Also, if they do the same stats but have a different model, then they'd surprisingly be ranked separately, because I'm just that guy and I like cool looks. And finally, any other game mode that has ARs that are specifically made for that game mode count too. So ARs from Blitz, Ballistic, OG, etc. count too. And with that out of the way, let's get into this. Okay, so at 114th place, yes, there are around 114 of them. It's unsurprisingly the makeshift AR from Chapter 2 Season 6. This thing is obviously terrible. The damage was okay and the fire rate was like 20% slower than your base AR, but what the problem is that accuracy. Like, damn, that accuracy just doesn't exist. There's even first shot accuracy when you stand still. Like, you have to be extremely lucky to hit a shot. That's how bad this thing was. No, this wasn't bad. This was absolutely atrocious. And I get that, because this thing was meant to be bad, so you can upgrade it to like an M16, which is an annoying process to do. So you were kind of stuck with this thing. And I'm so sorry if you've ever used this. Thank goodness this AR has not and will never come back. Well, until 2027 when Chapter 2 Remix Season 6 come out, if it even happens, which I doubt it will. At 113th is the First Order Blaster Rifle in Chapter 2 before Galactic Battle. At 112th place is the Chapter 2 E11 Blaster, which is basically the First Order Blaster but with a different name. At 111th place is the Sideways Rifle, and at 110th is the Tri-Beam Laser Rifle. You probably forgot about this weapon, but we'll talk about it anyway. This could have been a meta AR because it was the only hit scan weapon in the game, well, besides the pistol, but that was by killing the Wanderer, which is almost impossible, and then basically no one knew about it. This thing got a DPS of 117, and you know how bad 117 is? Like, it's so atrocious, it's horrible. Like, why? The reticle, was goofy and weird looking, but at least you can kinda aim with it. The recoil is bad too, and the only thing that's good about it is the fact that it's hit scan, but every projectile weapon was miles better than speed to grab. At 109th is the Primer Rifle and the Creative Mythic. At 108th is the Old Firm Assault Rifle, so the one in Chapter 1 and 2. And at 107th, it's the Drum Gun, but the one from like Chapter 1 Season 9 where it got nerfed to the ground. And at 106th, it's the Scar, but the one from Chapter 4. And when the Scar was good in Chapter 1, they brought it back to Earth in Chapter 2, or basically balancing it. And then they did the devil's work and nerfed that crap down to the ground and lower in Chapter 4. When they brought it back, everyone thought it was going to be the OP Scar that's always been. But then they ruined it. People overestimated it because they didn't realize how terrible the accuracy was. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the makeshift, because at least you can do first shot accuracy while standing still. But that thing is still bad. It also did lower damage because it had lower rarity, so finding one doesn't even feel good anymore. Everyone uses red eyes instead, and tax. Alright, we're gonna speed through these ones. Next at 105th, it's a scoped AR from Chapter 1. At 104th, it's a new Chapter 3 Plus version of the thermal scoped assault rifle. At 103rd, it's the E11 from before Galactic Battle. And at 102nd and 101st, it's Jules's and Shadow Madness's drum guns. We're gonna talk about them simultaneously because they're the exact same in every way. Well, besides the design. And these are just both nerf versions of the OG Madness drum gun from Chapter 2 Season 2, with them doing 24 damage with a fire rate of 8.5. It's a decent DPS, but that accuracy is still absolutely terrible. Even though it's meant to function like a hybrid of an SMG and an AR, but it's a bit too inaccurate for an AR and a bit too slow for an SMG. Also, Shadow Madness's drum gun is ranked 1 higher than Jules because it looks cooler. It will be the same case for even more weapons that function similarly. At 100th place, it's the scoped AR from Chapter 2, but only the green and blue versions. At 99th place, it's Madness's drum gun from Chapter 4, which only put above both drum guns because it does 1 more structure damage and looks way cooler. At 98th place, it's the purple and gold version of the scoped AR from Chapter 2. Yeah, I know, pretty long. At 97th place, it's the DC-15 Blaster from Chapter 4. And remember, it's not the one from Galactic Battle. And at 96th, it's the Ranger AR, and this gun is pretty trash. Not truthfully bad like some ARs, I'm looking at you, makeshift rifle, but it's still bad. It's an AK wannabe that does way less damage compared to it. It does 39 damage in Mythic, while the AK does the same crap in green, which is absolutely terrible. Obviously has a lower DPS. Also, the fact that the AK in its current state isn't even a good weapon to begin with, and the fact that the Ranger AR is trying to be that is insanely bad on its own, I can't lie. At 95th is the Havoc AR, which isn't even that good. Trust me. At 94th is the LMG after Chapter 3. At 93rd is the LMG before Chapter 3. At 92nd is the E11 before Galactic Battle. Well, no, sorry, after Galactic Battle. At 91st is the F11D Blaster. At 90th is the Tech AR before Chapter 4, which, yes, was done in Chapter 5 version because it got buffed this season, just recently. And at 89th is the Burst AR, but the Grey Food Blue version from Chapter 1. Okay, so before OG Fortnite Season 1 and during it, people were excited to use it after 6 years at the time. And when people used it, they thought it was good, but the more they used it, the more they realized how bad it was. I was there. I used it too. Then I realized it was bad. Let me explain why. That bloom! It's that bloom! It's terrible! It's so bad. Combined with the recoil and bam, this thing's unusable as flip. But still did good damage and had first shot accuracy when you stand it still. Next is the Suppressed Scar at 88th place. OXR Rifle at 87th. Enforced AR before Chapter 7, so the projectile version at 86th. And the Purple Gold AK from Chapter 2 only at 85th. The Purple and Gold versions of the FAMAS in Chapter 1 at 84th. The Flapjack Rifle at 83rd, the DLT-19 Blaster at 82nd, the Lead Spitter at 81st, and the Chapter 5 Tech at 80th. So the thing would have been around 100th place, but it just got buffed this season. So yeah, it got buffed from 133 DPS in Grey, which is absolutely atrocious and bad, to 140 in Chapter 5 Season 3 to 154 in Chapter 7 Season 1. And that's a massive damage buff, to be honest. Like a purple tack in Chapter 5 Season 2 on launch did the same damage as a grey tack now, which is how insane the buff is. Also consider the fact that you can put attachments on it, instantly making it better than the OG one, to be honest. But it was projectile, had terrible damage fall off, doing what, 13 damage from max distance, and also it's too fast to be an NER and too slow to be an SMG, so it's kind of hard to know what's useful. Next up at 79th place is the Drum Gun from Chapter 5. At 78th place is the Enforcer, that's his can. At 77th place is the DC-15 from Galactic Battle. And at 76th place, you might be really surprised with me on this one, but it's the Assault Rifle. Not the Scar though, the Grey Food Blue versions of the Scar in Chapter 1. So it's a pretty good AR, and all the weapons after this will be good ARs. It's just that there are a lot of good ones that are miles better than something like a classic basic assault rifle. That thing is usable in every situation, does good damage, has a good fire rate, and has manageable recoil and bloom, and basically has no flaws but no perks. But there are 75 other assault rifles that are better than what we had in the first season, which is just a basic assault rifle. Speaking of the 75 ARs that are better than the M16 in every way, one of them is the minigun. Yes, at 75th, it's the minigun. Yeah, it's better than the M16. And it's a decent spray weapon that does good damage, but you know, the one thing that really makes me hate this thing is its under average accuracy and that charge time. Like, it just makes me hate it even more, but other than that and the fact that it overheats, it's fine. At 74th place is the Collateral Damage AR, and at 73rd place is the Arc Lightning Gun, which is recently a new addition to Fortnite, so that's why I'm going to talk about it right now. So this gun in its own is absolute dog water, doing 9 damage and I think 12 in its mythic form, and having a DPS of around 90 to 120 between it and the mythic, so that's terrible on its own. But it does shock its way through builds, which is kind of insane. It's only good in builds, it has no use at zeros, and it ain't even in ranked. Well, it is right now, but as I'm writing the script, it wasn't, so that's why it's here. And 72nd and 71st place is the High-Tech Explosive AR and the Chapter 2 Moss. At 70th place is the Nemesis AR, and at 69th place is the Purple and Gold M16. So basically the Scar with a different model, and you probably never seen or use this weapon. And it's unsurprisingly at 68th place, it's the Scar. Yeah, the OGs would have probably expected it to be higher, but that ain't the case. This figure's a solid weapon and improved on everything that the M16 did. But this is Chapter 7 now, so they nerfed a lot since Chapter 1. In Chapter 1, specifically Season 1, it was the best AR of all time. Like, it did 39 damage to the body in gold and 98 to the head, and it had insane accuracy too. It was also great sounding as well. They nerfed the damage later and they made it less accurate and changed the sound. After the Chapter 1 nerfs, it was still great. Then in Chapter 2 they changed the model icon and nerfed it even more. Even after all that, it was still good. Just not the best gun anymore because the AUG overtook it as the best. We got better ARs than the Scar in Chapter 2, seasons passed, and it was vaulted in Chapter 3. Then in Chapter 4 they absolutely destroyed this thing and it was vaulted shortly after. And in OG Fortnite 2023, they just made it made with solid damage and bad blue. At 16.75 times 4th place, it's the purple and gold versions of the Burst AR from OG Fortnite Season 1. And this is the first thing on this list to never be in Battle Royale. You can only get in OG Season 1, and since all purple and gold, they're extremely hard to find because it was OG Fortnite Season 1. Like, what do you expect? But other than that, it's an amazing AR. What I would have said if that horrific bloom didn't exist is it did like 37 damage for gold. It had a fire rate of around 4 and did one burst someone to the head if you hit all 3 shots, which is basically impossible. That's also another problem. Why did it have to be a 3-round burst? Like, you're never gonna hit that first shot, so it's just a waste of ammo as well. At 66th place, it's the FAMAS from Chapter 4+. At 65th, it's Blissbot's Carty's Nemesis AR, which is a new addition that's just a Chapter 5 Mythic Nemesis AR without the scope. At 64th, it's the Red AR, surprisingly. At 63rd, it's the Mythic from the Simpsons season, one of the only ARs I've never used. At 62nd, it's the Greyfood Blue Infantry Rifle. At 61st, it's the Warforged, and at 60th, it's Blitzbot's Ninja's Viper AR. There's a Mythic Silent Scar that did 36 damage, and there's 3 damage after that multiple times consistently, like a stink effect. Well, other than that, it's just a basic silent assault rifle, nothing else. I'm only talking about this because it's our first Blitz AR. At 59th, it's the best pulse rifle, and at 58th, it's the Chapter 4 TAC AR. This thing is actually kind of good. It also has a red dot scope, and there's barely any recoil, but the damage is kind of bad. And at 57 other assault rifles that are miles better than this. Also, it's mid because it's in the smack dab middle of the list. At 57th, it's the MK Alpha. At 56th, it's the 82AZ Blaster Rifle. At 55th, it's the Launch 30 Collateral Damage Assault Rifle. And at 54th, it's Madison's Drum Gun, but the one from Chapter 5. But this gun is actually not that bad. It had a scope which eliminated bloom, manageable recoil, a good DPS of around 200, which is pretty good for an assault rifle. So you might be wondering, why did I rank it at 54th place? Well, it's the same reason for the Chapter 4 TAC. There are just 53 other assault rifles that are better. Also, you have to consider that's a projectile weapon going against a lot of head-scanned ones, so yeah. At 53rd place is Montague's Nemesis Assault Rifle, and at 52nd and 51st place is the Enhanced Scar and the Embiggen M16. They're essentially the same weapon, but I ranked the M16 higher because it looks cooler. They're both the same scar that you all know and love. Well, not all of you, but that's 38 to the body and 76 to the head, so just the damage above. But a little difference to the scar and a massive difference to the M16. After that, at 50th place, we have the Tactical Assault Rifle from Chapter 7. You might be wondering, when did this weapon actually get added to Chapter 7? Well, only 5 days ago, on the 11th as I'm writing this sentence, and it's an improvement from the Chapter 5 TAC. Well, it only has some minor differences though, but it's hit scan now, which makes this thing good because you can actually use them from far away with bullet travel. Also, it's suppressed too, so it's better in that way as well. Also, it looks nice. At 49th place is the Evo Chrome Burst Rifle, and this weapon is pretty unique, like 2 other weapons on this list. So basically, the more kills you get and the more damage you do with this weapon, the better rarity you get, and up to Mythic as well. But to be honest, we're going to be talking about the purple to Mythic rarity, because that thing is broken-ish. Well, it's extremely broken because it has a DPS of, I think, 300. Might be more or less, but whatever. And if you consider the damage and fire rate, then it's one of the best ARs ever. But the Greyfood Blue version are absolutely trash compared. The grey one has a fire rate of around 100, which is the worst thing I've ever seen in my 2 consistent years of playing this game, if you don't count Chapter 1 and 2, which I did even clip. Anyways, so that's why it barely made it to the top 50. At 48th place, it's the Combat AR from Chapter 5, and at 47th, it's the Morphite Scar. So this is the first Morphite weapon we've got on this list, and this thing is pretty good. It does sub-scar damage, but it makes up with that for fire rate of 6.4. What's also for being higher than Skies and Ice Rise to Scars is obviously the damage and that bloom. It's still bad! At 46th place, it's Ares Warforged AR. At 45th place, it's the Furry AR. At 44th, it's the Combat AR from Chapter 2. At 43rd, it's the Bullet Drop Stark Rifle, so the one from Chapter 5. At 42nd, it's the AK from Chapter 1. And at 41st, it's the Pulse Rifle. And this thing is pretty good. It does a lot of damage when you ADS, like 52. But fire rate is extremely slow for that, so it makes it balanced. Also, it's in first shot accuracy most of the time, and there's barely any recoil, and the bloom is real Santa. Sorry, 7-year-olds, but I think it's best if you know that Santa's a real now. Anyways, but when you hip fire, the fire rate doubles, but the damage is like 36, which is still pretty good. So that's a gimmick. But because it really isn't OP, but still very good, it gets 41st on this list. At 40th place is the purple and gold version of the infantry rifle from Chapter 1. This figure's pretty great, but not the best. It basically functions the same as the pulse rifle roughly in damage, but whether you hit by ADS, it's still gonna be fast and hard hitting, and when you ADS, you get instant first shot accuracy resets when you shoot, and it's so accurate, no bloom and little recoil. But this thing only has like 10 bullets in a mag, and this version isn't fully auto. Well, till the Simpsons season, but that version will be in a different spot. At 39th place is Strike AR, and this is the projectile one from chapter 5, but I won't go into depth about this because the hit scan one deserves way more explaining. At 38th place is the fully auto infantry rifle from the Simpsons season. At 37th is the stock Industries energy rifle from chapter 2, and at 36th is the modified AK. So basically this is the same AK we know and love, but that's the level up features like the Evo Chrome and Morphite assault rifles, and it also has way less bloom, significantly improving this. That's why the AK was bad in the first place, and fixing that actually makes this thing not just usable but a great weapon too. At 35th place is the Twin Mag, and at 34th is the MK7. This thing used to be insane until it got nerfed, and right now it's still pretty good, just not the best. It only pushed in chapter 3 season 1 when it only had the Ranger AR's competition, but as chapter 3 progressed, better ARs came to the game like the Hammer AR and Striker Burst, and even in chapter 6 when it came back, it was still kind of useless because the Hollow Twister existed. But it's mythic, which will be way high on this list. It's significantly better than the normal AK. Still a great weapon though. At 33rd place is the exotic version of the Urgsar, which does a crap ton of damage with a moderate fire rate, but the bloom recoil does have some problems. At 32nd is the Orc from chapter 2, which overtook the Scars the best AR in the meta for a while, until it was vaulted. Also, the thing at good accuracy did good damage at 37, I think, with a moderate fire rate, but it's just that other ARs were better at doing this job than the Orc, and that's why it's where it is on this list. At 31st place is the Drum Gun, but during season 4 and 5, so basically in its prime. I already talked about this early in December, so go check my community post for that. But if you're lazy, then I'll summarize it for you. So basically, this thing was so broken, being an AR that springs from long ranges. It saw the spray meta and dominated season 4 as well. At 30th and 29th place is Mythic Scars, Sky Scar and Ice Spice's rifle, and they basically function the same. It's just that Ice Spice's rifle just has the pepper effect, which makes you run slightly faster. Speaking of faster, they're both faster than the original Scar and are more accurate, so it instantly becomes better and more overpowered. Also does 37 damage, which is barely a damage buff, but that's insignificant. They both dominated in their seasons, and people even used it over the Orc for Ice's case for Moss, and also for Ice's. There's another assault rifle that unexpectedly became one of the best ARs of all time, which we'll get into later. At 28th place is the Mythic Combat Assault Rifle. I don't really have anything to say about this because I barely even use it, but it's a spraying demon with barely magical recoil and no bloom because of that scope. It does have bullet drop though, and the fact that there are way better weapons on this list makes it go in 28th, and that's still a good spot for an AR. At 27th place is Ocean's Orc, which is the same thing, but it does slightly more damage. And at 26th is the Hammer AR. The Hammer is the second best AR on reload as of December 17th, 2025, because it does 33 damage with a fire rate of around 6 with barely any bloom, and manageable recoil as well. In fact, it doesn't even feel like there's any recoil, so it makes it even better. It was the meta AR for chapter 6 season 4 till they vaulted it, because that's how good it was. And it was the meta for reload till they added the spy rifle, which we'll get onto later. But we can all agree that it's an amazing gun, right? At 25th place is the Strike AR from the Simpsons season. This, the infantry rifle, and Mr. Blossy were the meta range weapons because of how broken they were. I already kind of covered the infantry. Mr. Blossy's a pistol, so we're going to talk about the Striker. It's a fast firing, good hitting, accurate if you tap fire, hit scan weapon with no flaws. It just needs something like a scope or more damage to make it better. I'm sorry if I'm not being descriptive enough for the weapons. I'm just a dumb kid trying to explain why the Striker is good, so you cut me some slack. At 24th place is the Arc from chapter 3, and it basically does the same thing as the chapter 2 version, but has a scope and does 4 less damage. At 23rd place, it's a recent addition, there you are. Same case with the Orc. It does like 10 less damage than the M16, but it has a scope, and that makes a massive difference to it. So that's why it's on this list at 23rd. At 22nd is the exotic Accelerant Hollow Twister. It's the same as the Deadeye AR, it's just a better scope, 1 more damage than the Gold Deadeye, and it gets faster every time you shoot it. And at 21st place is the exotic Furry. Like, this thing is actually so underrated, and I love it. First, it's so accurate and it has like no bloom. First shot accuracy resets instantly, and you can ADS mid-air. And this was one of the first weapons to do it before chapter 7. So that's how good it was, and still is. Does around 30 damage with a fire rate of 7 or 6, but I don't exactly know because I'm too lazy to check. But that hot rock effect is kind of bad, unless you want to gain height, so that's why it's here. Also, the other weapons are little aimbot or spray goes out on this list, so that's why it's at this place. Basically saying they're all better. At 20th place, it's Nisha Striker, yo. Okay, I need to take a deep breath before talking about this. Nisha Striker is one of the best assault rifles I've ever used. Anything but an assault rifle, like a makeshift, because that's ass. It may be projectile, but it's a fast-firing, hard-hitting gun that has a scope. And you gotta consider that because if it has a scope, it's fast and hard-hitting. Well, only around 30 damage per hit, but still, it's obviously gonna dominate the meta and destroy. And that would be the case of 3 particular weapons that exist. But yeah, it's insane as frick. At 19th place is the Orc from Chapter 5. I feel like this weapon is miles better than the base striker and a little bit better than the Mythic, and I'll explain why. It has a fire rate of around 5 and does around 35 in gold and 37 in Mythic, and it's a 2-round burst weapon. Almost no recoil, easily get rid of bloom by adding a scope, and it sounds sleek as frick. Like, how much info do you need to show you that this deserves to be here? I gave you the pieces, and I think the puzzle spells out that it's freaking broken. Meta Assault Rifle Chapter 5 Season 4, better than Striker, Combat, and Stark Rifle, and I still sometimes use this to cook to this day. Anyways, let's talk about another Orc, because at 18th place, it's Sloan's from Chapter 2. Its hit scanner has no bloom or recoil, so why wouldn't it be at this placement? Has no scope because it came out in Chapter 2, and every good AR had no scope, but this is still pretty accurate. But other than it having less bullets and a clip, more accuracy, then it's just Ocean's Orc. At 17th place is Brutus's minigun, and this thing is absolutely broken. This does 20-something damage with a fire rate of 12 or 13. Do you know how insane that is? That's a DPS of at least 240, which when it's over 200, you know you're gonna cook. Also, it's a wall destroyer because you can mow down builds with this thing, and nothing can get in your way too. Also, for a spray weapon, it's actually pretty accurate, which is a surprise considering the fact that sprays like crazy. Every time it's been in the game, it absolutely dominates. So Chapter 2, 4, and 6. Fortnite, you owe me some money if it comes back in Chapter 8. So yeah, that's the minigun story, and how it's significantly better than the one in OG right now. But that charge time is annoying though, so please fix that. At 16th and 15th place, it's Modest's drum gun from Chapter 2 and Snoop's from Chapter 2 Remix. They basically function the same, so we're going to talk about them simultaneously. So these things were obviously broken, but in what way? Well, basically the same reasons as the Mythic minigun, but there's no charge time. You instantly start spraying, have a DPS of 250, so you can get into people's boxes faster, and it's more accurate. Also, I ranked Snoop Dogg's drum gun higher because it looks cooler. At 14th place is RG's minigun, and it's higher than the Mythic minigun from Season 12 because it has a faster cooldown time, and obviously looks cooler. At 13th place, you might be surprised, but it's a sideways minigun, because when you spray with it long enough, the fire rate doubles, and you basically have aimbot when you spray with it. But it gets 13th because the first half of using it is pretty mid. At 12th place is the Orc from Chapter 6 Season 2, and the only difference it has to the Chapter 5 version is it has hit scan, as it has a built-in red dot scope, which makes this more of an aimbot AR. Also, the damage didn't get reduced because it was hit scan, so that's a big dub unlike the Strike AR, sadly. And at 11th place, it's a Spider Rifle, and you may think this is glazed, but let me cook, man. Okay, this has to be one of the best scopeless ARs that you can use right now. It does AK-like damage, has a moderate fire rate of 5, no recoil, and almost no bloom, and it has 50 bullets in a clip. It's hit scan as well. Like, what more do you want from this thing? Like, I know the reload time is horrible, but you barely need to reload, considering the fact that it only has 50 bullets in a clip. So that's why it's the best scopeless AR you can use right now. But there are two better ones. One hasn't been in the game since November 2024, and the other one's hard to get. And one of them next assault rifles I mentioned in my previous paragraph that I just said is the TAC AR at 10th place from Chapter 2 Remix. And it's the same TAC AR from Chapter 1, just has clapping noises at its firing sound, and it has 0 recoil and 0 bloom, and it's scopeless as well. Also consider the fact that it has a fire rate of 7 too. Like, bro, you can't argue with me in that one, man. Like, bro, it's insta aimbot. Like, it's the best assault rifle in Chapter 2 Remix. Like, this thing was insane. At 9th place is Modest's drum gun, but from Chapter 6, so it's the go to die. And this thing is absolutely, you already know the word I'm gonna say. It does like 26 damage with a fire rate of around 9, and that on its own is crazy. That equates to a DPS of around 230 something. And I told you that any AR that does over 200 damage per second is gonna be absolutely insane. So it's an absolute spray god. Okay, now you might be thinking, they probably made it scopeless and has a ton of bloom and recoil. Well, there's some recoil, but the bloom doesn't exist. Yes, it has a scope, specifically a thermal scope. It just has that particular scope that's obviously going to make this good for long ranges. It's also hit scan too, so you can destroy this thing. It also has clip size of 40, so you can spray for longer. The only thing that needs improvement is the recoil, but other than that, it's insanely broken. At 8th place is the Foundation's MK7, and you guys do not understand how broken this thing is. It's a pretty fast, hard-hitting scoped hit scan assault rifle like normal MK. but they just absolutely changed this thing to make it broken. I kind of forgot the stats though, and I'm writing the script on a bus with like no internet, so I can't even search it up. But I can tell you from experience that this thing is insane. It's just so creative maps like Toy Box, Free For All, and then Reload. Then you can witness the power of this thing. It feels broken like you have aimbot. At 7th place is the Hollow Twister, which is technically the best assault rifle of all time. But since we're calling mythics and ballistic weapons, we're gonna put it at 7th place. You guys will understand how insane this thing is. Yeah, it's another scoped hit gun AR, but this thing isn't doing 27 damage. It's doing 35 in mythic with a fire rate of 5.2. And I know that isn't extremely fast, but for spraying it gets a job done. Also has no bloom and almost no recoil, so you can aim with this thing and get shots easily. And even though it's a hollow optic scope and not a red dot, it's still extremely accurate, and you can aimbot with this thing if you're not a noob. I mean, I am, but I'm like not that bad. I love it, and it's amazing, and obviously dominated this meta. At 6th place is the Overclock Pulse Rifle, the best weapon to ever come to Battle Royale. And it's only here because when you hit fire, it does 40 damage at a fire rate of roughly 6. And you don't understand how crazy that is. You can eviscerate with balls in less than a second, and players without overshield as well. Also does 57 damage if you ADS. And that's just the most ever on one hit with an assault rifle. And 80 to the head as well. That with a fire rate of 4 and having no bloom and having no scope, it just makes this thing crazy, and no recoil too, so it's aimball. Even when you hip fire, it's aimball as well. That's how insane it is. But literally all the ballistics ARs have a DPS of more than 300, so the pulse has no chance to them. Speaking of that, at 5th place is the ballistic drum gun. This thing does around 37 damage with a fire rate of 12.4, and that's a DPS of 460, which is the highest DPS for any weapon that's been added to Fortnite. But even though that DPS is high as frick, it still has a little bloom unless you stand still and crazy recoil, but the DPS carries this. At 4th place is the Nemesis AR from Ballistics. So yeah, this thing is more broken than the drum gun, because even though it has a DPS of under 400 by 10, it has a scope and less recoil, instantly making it way better than the drum gun. At 3rd place is the Strike AR from Ballistic, and it's here because it has a fire rate of 11, obviously more than 30 damage per hit, and has a scope, so basically the same as the Nemesis, but because it's a striker, it's better. At 2nd place is the Enforcer AR from Ballistic, and it's here because it does 60 damage with a fire rate of 5, and has the P2X optic, its hit scan, has manageable recoil even though it's fast, it one-shots to the head and even zeros, and that's absolutely insane. But there's one more assault rifle that does the same damage but faster and more accurate. And that weapon, my friend, at 1st place is the Ballistic Hawk. And I love everything about this. The fire rate is 7, which is more than average for an assault rifle. So in other words, that's pretty damn fast. There's 150 damage per burst at extremely fast speeds. So that makes this insane. 50 damage per hit. Even if it has bloom and recoil bumped up to the max, it has a hollow optic, meaning that's guaranteed to be very accurate unless it has a ton of recoil. But it barely does, but it's manageable. And since it has a DPS of 350, you can spray your balls off with this as well. And that's why I believe the Ballistic Burst Assault Rifle is the best AR ever made in the history of Fortnite. And yeah, that's the list. Let me know your opinions on this in the comments below. Anyways, you've watched it to the end, so you probably enjoyed it. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can see more content like this. Hopefully, we can get to 2K before 2027 and 1.5K before 2026. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and goodbye.